I've offered to welcome you and then turn it over to Sonny. So I'm really grateful all of you are here, and it's such a good cause. And I'm sure maybe Sonny will talk about it or not. But I have to say I've been to a number of these concerts, and they're really amazing. And so I can't believe I'm on the program. I'm really excited and honored to be playing with Sonny tonight.
Thank you.
And this will be fun.
Yeah, no, I don't have too much to add to that. I'll just say that Helen's been coming up in the summer times, and this is our third summer of playing music together, and it gets increasingly more fun and better to play. And somehow we wound up with an Ellington focus, a Duke Ellington focus. So as the program goes along, you'll see that. And pretty much what's on the program is what we've been doing. You know, it's just music that we've decided we could play happily together. And it's got this Ellington focus, and then things kind of focus themselves. So I'm really happy to share the music with you. It feels like an unusual collaboration and a real good one. So we're going to start with this, I think, Duke Ellington's Daydream, which I didn't know before until I think Helen introduced me to this tune. And it's an old one, and I think you can hear, if you know the Ellington repertoire and Ellington music, you'll hear Billy Strayhorn's voice in this too. So we'll do it. So I get to start. All right. Daydream. Yeah. And then something completely different. The song, maybe some of you have heard. I like this. I like to play these songs. I wrote this song 50 years ago. Can I tell? Because I wrote it when my son was 1 year old, and it was maybe he was 2, and I remember asking him. It's called "Have You Seen the Moon?" And I remember going into his bedroom and thinking and asking him, the moon was really nice that night, and I said, "Have you seen the moon?" And I thought, well, maybe he'd never seen it, or he never really realized that it was called the moon, or he was just getting language together. So I thought that stuck in my head, that whole moment. So I was working on this song at the same time. So that's the name of the song. So it's got a couple different rhythms in it, and you'll hear them. You'll hear the 2 different rhythms, and one's kind of it feels like a East Asia kind of rhythm, and then it has an American kind of Motown rhythm. So we'll play it for you. All right, hey, thanks. Thanks. Thank you. Oh, fun, thanks. Yeah, we're going to continue in the program. You've got programs, so you can tell I don't have to announce too much. But I guess this requires some explanation. This next song, it's called Heart Song, and it's really a way of getting involved with the song of Duke Ellington's called "I Let a Song Go Out of My Heart," which do you guys know that song? Unless you've heard that song, it's and it's a sort of joyful and a lovely title. "I Let a Song Go Out of My Heart," and it's not a lot of times people take the chords of a song and make new melodies from them. And this isn't quite like that. I don't know what this is. It's kind of its own thing. I thought of because I rewrote the rhythms, but it's definitely inspired by, and not trying to hide the fact that it comes from Duke Ellington's song. And I thought the only parallel, I said this to Helen, I was trying to explain what it was or figure it out. It's a little bit Picasso did that kind of thing where he'd copy Goya or something like, or Delacroix, or some artist you wouldn't think that he would copy, and then but just change it all around. But it's just a way to get involved with it or to try to understand it. So maybe that's what we're trying to do. All right. Heart song, let's see. All right, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. All right. Nice. Nice, Helen. Let's see, where are we in the program? Good, we have our program. It's, oh no, so this is again something completely different, and trying to figure out how to play together, what to play, and how to. Helen has a background as a classical violinist, so that and hadn't done any really improvising at all until the last 3 years. And so we're thinking, well, what would be fun to play? What would be easy? What would be hard? Because she's really musical, has played tons of music in her life and practices all the time, and plays Bach really as a specialty. So we did something. What can we do? And I picked this tune that I wrote again. It's in 7/4 time, and it's only in one key. It doesn't have any changes to go through, so the soloist doesn't have to keep switching keys. But it makes up for that simplification by being more complex rhythmically. So we're going to play this song called Piccolo Lute. Let me get my chart. Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Piccolo lid. Well, we're going to do another one. It's very much in the spirit of Ellington, but it's not by Ellington at all. It's Duke Ellington. This is called Twice Told Tale, and it's one that I wrote. But it's Twice Told Tale sounds like a little bit like the Nathaniel Hawthorne Toys Told Tales. But it's also, well, it's like a Duke Ellington song, but it's all over again. Toys Told, or it's a story told a couple times. And we're going to play it for you. And looks like it starts with a piano. And then, okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. No, it was nice playing. I wanted. We're going to take a break, but before we take a break, I wanted to say something about partly we enjoy playing. We enjoy playing together very much. We felt a little self-conscious playing, and so I thought we should. And we both sometimes when we stop playing, we talk about politics. You have to say something to each other, and we don't agree about every single thing, but we do feel strongly about a lot of things, and there's a lot of overlap in our worldview, and we both think Migrant Justice is a great organization, and then sometimes, very often times, the things like what's somebody supposed to do? You can't really do anything, and one thing we can do, and one of the things we can all do, is support the people who do know what they're doing, and Migrant Justice is a group that's like that. They're doing great work, and they need money to operate. That's one reason we picked that group. So I appreciate everybody coming and contributing to. That's my pitch for extra funds for Migrant Justice.
It was a great choice.
Thank you. And so we're going to take a short break. And well, thanks for hanging in, everybody. We're gonna play the second set, and start with a piece that I wrote that's got a kind of like a Arabian Nights title, The Invisible Cloak, and I'm not. I guess it had that kind of feeling for me, and I think Helen plays it great. Has revived my interest in this song, and I think I originally thought of it for violin, so it's great to get a chance to hear it. I'll play an intro and take the first solo. All right. Nice. All right. Hey. Thanks. Nice. Yeah. And now we're going to return to the Ellington theme. And I guess I started trying the song Satin Da is one of the most played of jazz songs. And I've always enjoyed the song, but had trouble playing it. So this is another chance. I tried to get involved with it and figure out is there some way I can get into this tune. And I wound up rewriting the song. And then, forgive me if you've heard this story before, but it's funny enough to tell it again. Heard a routine of Richard Pryor years ago where he talked about when he was a young comic, he worked with a exotic dancer who called herself Satin Doll. And the story that he told was that he just thought she was terrific, and they had struck up a friendship during the act, and he was like 18 or 19, and he said they're playing in this club that was owned by a gangster, and he didn't know anything about gangsters or anything about that, and this guy, this Italian club owner, said he was just not going to pay Satin Doll or anybody else and just get out. And Richard Pryor heard about it from Satin Doll, and he was offended, and so he said that he didn't say anything. He just got this pretend gun, like a water pistol or something, and he went into the office of this mobster guy which was like really ill-advised, and he said, he said, all right, stick him up. And he went into his his best black stuff, where he tried to convince this guy that he was going to be, that he was going to take care of him if he didn't pay up. And the club owner just thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And he said, "Look at this guy, Tony, come here. This guy, he can't stop being funny. It's just, and he thought, he started putting his arm around him and rubbing his head. And he said, so he wasn't really much of a threat. But I thought about that. It made me think of, and so he did. But he did. I guess the story had a happy ending, because at least the way Richard Pryor told it, that he did, because he thought it was cool and funny. He just thought Richard Pryor was trying to be funny. He didn't take it seriously for a minute, and so he did pay everybody, according to how the story goes. But it made me think of that occupation, exotic dancer, and we don't have that so much. It's a whole. When I was a little kid, I remember seeing places where they have exotic dancers, and they don't. We don't have them around here anymore. Probably lots of places they do, and it's so it made me when I got into Satin Doll. I wonder if Duke Ellington knew this Satin Doll person. I don't know which came first. So that was a long detour, but we're going to play the song for you now. And it's the same sort of thing. We're a reworking of the tune. Nice. Good. Hey, Satin Doll. Oh, to a Satin Doll. Yeah, we got a couple more to do. I'm going to play this one. I always like this song. I wrote this song before I came to Vermont, and it was first song I ever did that had time changes in it. And I've sort of had a thing about changing the rhythm in a song, and that I've always, it's a device that has helped me to play, and I'm part of a movement. It's a new thing that's happening in music where people change time signatures, and I'm just, it was the time for it, so to speak. And this is called Alix's Dream. And Alix was a 12-year-old girl that I knew in suburban Philadelphia before we moved here, and she was a ballet dancer, and there was a ballet studio in the town we lived in, and she didn't have enough money, and she suspected that my family could help her get into this, pay for her tuition for this school. So she said she had this dream where she would be a dancer and a choreographer one day, and she asked us to help support her, and we did. And I remember that she said that so the Alix's dream was like her dream. She said she wrote a note where she said, "I have a dream that I could do this." And so it was sort of charming. And she did become a dancer and a choreographer as well. And she's living in Germany. I'm not in touch with her lately, but she did have a career. So that when you write a song like that and name it always takes me back. Think about You know, that must happen to everybody that writes a story or anything. You ever think about that time you did it?
I'll just add.
Yeah, yeah,
That,
go ahead.
when Sonny and I first
Thanks.
played this and he told me this story,
Yeah.
it was like program music to me. And then when I practiced at home, I practiced it really slowly because I was telling this story. And then Sonny plays it so fast. So he agreed to let me count us in.
Thank you
here.
for reminding me.
Some kind of a compromise
Yeah.
tempo. So
Good.
what shall we do? 1, 2, 3.
Did it? All right, good for you. Nice playing. Yeah, we made it. We made it. That's a tricky song to play. You have to really stay on your toes.
Like, Sonny, when are we going back to the melody?
That's what I thought. I thought I thought you were making. I was leaving it up to you, and you're leaving it up to me.
Yeah, it was up to me.
That can happen.
This is very interesting work here.
By the fifth time through, we were getting to know it better. Got to play something this time, you know. So we got one more tune, our grand finale. And this, we worked on this tune. It's another Duke Ellington inspiration. He wrote a tune in 1927 or 28 called "A Creole Love Call," which probably was an old-fashioned tune in 1927 or 28, and was an early recording as his vocalist Adelaide Hall, and Helen listened to the record and enjoyed Adelaide Hall's contribution, and also picked up on, I think it was Ray Nance's or somebody's, Barbara Miley's
Other people's.
trumpet players, and
And
notated.
clarinetist is Russ Procope. Do you know that name? And the first blues solo is Willie Cook.
Oh, okay.
Since you're mentioning
Yeah,
names.
no, I want to know. No, thanks. And so there's a lot in this. We play the original melody, and then the solos that Helen liked. Some of them she learned and wrote down even. And then I think one time Helen said, "I don't know what to play," so I thought I said I'll try to write an improvisation, and she could play it, and she played it great, and it was. And then I did it again, and we did it. Like 7 weeks went by, and I wrote 7 different variations, and so we have them all. It's become a little collection. So I think it makes sense, but we're still figuring that out. Yeah. Hey, all right, thank you. Yeah, we made it. Thanks. Thank you. That was a debut performance of that piece. So that was,
You heard a world premiere.
yeah, she said a mouthful. Yeah, it was a lot of notes there. Thank you, everybody. That's our program. That's what we've got. Thank you for being such a good, attentive audience. Really appreciate everybody's ears and attention. Thank you.
It was great. It was wonderful.